Hi, this is Ibarionex from the Candid Frame. When I think of other genres of photography, be it portraiture, landscape, food photography, I often think about light. Because when you discuss those types of imagery, it's not just about the subject matter itself, it's often about the lighting. And with street photography, sometimes I think the whole idea of the importance of light gets lost because so much is focused on the people that are on the street, the action on the street. And for me, I don't like to lose sight of the importance of light. Granted that when I'm on the street, I don't have complete control over that. It depends on what time of day I go out there, what the weather's going to be like. There's a lot that I don't have at my control, but I'm nevertheless always trying to pay attention to the quality of the light and having that inform what I do with so much of my photography. So I decided to pull 3 images in which I thought light was really at the core of what makes the image successful. So let's get started. Here's an image by Dominic Mugato. We don't have any EXIF information on this particular shot. But when I saw this shot come up on my screen, for me it was all about the light. This is an ordinary, mundane scene of a restaurant or some sort of convenience mart. And it's the kind of place that you walk into maybe a couple of times a week, depending on what part of the world that you're in. It's completely ordinary. You walk into a space like this and you're just thinking of, picking up a bottle of pop or getting some cigarettes or getting a cup of coffee, whatever it is. And you're not really paying attention to the environment. You're just kind of there to do whatever you need to do and get out. But the light here creates this almost surreal, beautiful place out of something as ordinary as a rest stop. The light makes all the colors, not only within the scene but outside of the window, just pop. The reds, the yellows, the blues. The colors become saturated. They're so vibrant, and they really become the anchor of the image. And I think that's really kind of important to pay attention to, is the sort of the quality of the light. This looks like it was probably done either in the early morning or the late afternoon, just because of the direction of the light and how it creates these sort of really pronounced shadows within the space. If this was noon, this area would just be illuminated by the indoor lighting. The sun would be overhead, and so it would have no possibility of illuminating this scene in the way that it does. And that's what makes the shot really fascinating for me, because of the way the way the light transforms everything in the scene. It becomes about light, it becomes about shadow, it becomes about form and pattern. And in the midst of all this, we have this fellow whose back is to us, but who nevertheless we have a sense of, just because of the way he wears the jacket, his overall shape, the haircut, and especially sort of the blonde hair and sort of the reddish, almost reddish orange color of his skin, and the way the light kisses just the back of his ear. I'm not thinking that this is a guy in his 20s or anything. This guy looks to me like he's middle-aged, and even though he's not doing anything, his presence in that shot becomes the anchor of the image. Now, imagine the shot without him in it. It still would be a really interesting shot in terms of shape, in terms of color, in terms of light. But his presence in the middle of the shot makes the shot for me. He provides a context. He provides an overall balance to, what are we doing here? I don't know if he's reading that sign in front, whether he's about to go to one of the vending machines or one of the kiosks, whatever's in there that we may or may not be able to see. But his presence there is important. And we experience that shot almost as if we were there with him. And I think the light is just so much of what makes this shot work for me. Typically, others might look at the shot and go, oh, it's so busy. We got that red car in the background, and we got all the signage. And, those are the kind of things that I tend to want to avoid in my shots just because they can be so distracting. But in this case, all of those things contribute to the shot. I often tell my students, when you look through the frame, you have to decide what things serve your subject and what things don't. And if they serve your subject, you keep it. And if it doesn't serve your subject, you find some way of getting rid of it. Well, in this case, everything seems to have to be in the frame. And it just works really, really nicely. All right, our next shot was made by L.J. McCallister. It was shot with a Leica M8 at 1/250th of a second at ISO 640. Now, this is the kind of scene I'm always hunting for. I'm looking for a scene where the light is sort of informing the foundation of the photograph. It's providing a great setting. It provides potential for a really, really good shot. So let's not even consider the human figure in this shot for right now. So this scene is really remarkable because we're seeing this directional light, and it creates this repeating pattern of vertical lines created by the light hitting the architecture and then throwing the rest of it into shadow. And it creates this wonderful repeating shape of these vertical lines that go from really tall to smaller and smaller and smaller towards the left hand of the frame. It creates these shadows that help separate and define each of these vertical shafts of light. The light and shadow also create this wonderful dark triangle, which serves as a counterpoint to this second triangle, which is created by these repeating patterns. And they also have the kiss of light here on the sidewalk itself, and the shadow that's created here. So we have this interplay of light and shadow that persists throughout the entire frame. And so when you make this overall composition, again, not even considering the human subject in the frame, you look at it and you just go, wow, this is a really pleasing composition. It works just as an overall frame. And then when you have the human figure, it completes it. Because now we have a figure that serves as a counterpoint to everything that's happening here. It complements it. It gives us a sense of scale, of proportion. And the character of the figure also mimics a little bit of the triangle that we're seeing here in the splay of his legs here near the bottom of the frame. And I'm always looking for triangles and the repetition of triangles because I just think that they add a nice vibrancy and an energy to the frame. This triangle created by the separation of his legs would be completely lost if it wasn't for this bright area behind him. If this area here was all relegated to shadow, his entire body would be lost to shadow, and he would just be a floating head within the frame, and that wouldn't work with the shot. So again, it's the lighting that's helping all of this come together. If this was a more evenly lit scene, say the sun was coming from behind the photographer's back, so everything here was sort of evenly illuminated, this pattern that we're seeing wouldn't be evident. We would see the pillars or whatever these things are here, but their shape and their pattern wouldn't be as cleanly defined as they are now. And the shot probably would create a scene where all of this stuff is fairly flat, and it would be really dependent on this human figure in order to make the shot work. Now, I think it's more important to sort of take a look at the entire frame, not just the human figure, and think about, well, what is the light doing? What is the shadow doing? Can I build a shot even before a human figure comes into the frame? And can I make a photograph that's really interesting to look at, in which the human figure is sort of like the cherry on top? It's the accent, it's the gesture that really takes the shot from being sort of ordinary and makes it potentially extraordinary. Here we have a shot by Molly Porter, shot with a Sony ILCE 6000, shot at 1/100th of a second at f1.8 at ISO 200. Now this is a shot of a woman at Starbucks having, looks like an iced coffee, and she's doing some work. And the light here for me is really quite remarkable. I don't know if it's sort of a overcast day or a cloudy day. It doesn't seem like we're dealing with direct light here, but the light that is illuminating her face is really remarkable. It has a very soft, even quality to it, so we don't get these very harsh or distracting shadows that play across her face. And at that point, that light that's hitting her face becomes the whole anchor of the shot. There's a uniformity, there's a smoothness there as a result of the quality of the light that's falling on her face, that all of a sudden serves as a counterpoint and a contrast to everything else that's happening here. We have all these dark tones and repeating dark patterns that persist throughout the entire frame. Some of it is from the windows of the buildings that are across the street from the Starbucks here, which are relegated to shadow. So these light areas here are basically the frame of the architecture that's framing the windows that are across the street that are being reflected in the window. And because the angle at which they are relative to the light source, these areas are being relegated to shadow, and you get to see some specular highlights in the windows. But all of that is creating this really kind of interesting pattern that's thrown out of focus because of the shallow depth of field. And then within the space itself, we have a similar pattern, but it's sort of reversed. We have these sort of squarish things that sort of mimic the squarish appearance of the windows across the street. But here, the things are reversed. The frames around these squares are dark, and the areas within them are bright. And these are obviously the menus in the Starbucks. So we have this pattern that's basically serving as the background for the setting here. And all of it is about light, right? But it's light in a variety of different ways. It's the light that's falling on our face. It's the light that's hitting the building. It's the artificial illumination that's illuminating the menu and the marquee. We have this space back here inside of the Starbucks where the artificial light is creating this light on what looks like to be part of a wall or a facade here. These looks to be like these large coffee containers or possibly seats. But the light here is really important here. As much as I love the light on her face, this light that's behind her is really important because it creates a sense of separation between her and this background. If this was all dark, her dark clothes would bleed into the background, and we would lose sight of her overall shape. You can see here on her right side, we do lose some of that detail there because some of it's lost here, but especially here, it's important to provide that sense of depth within the space here. We also have some nice light hitting her notebook that she seems to be writing in. Light hits her hand. She seems to have a bag here. The light sort of hitting it. We have this nice sort of repeating pattern here that sort of mimics some of the lines that are appearing throughout the frame. But again, for me, it's the quality of the light everywhere that makes the shot really, really interesting. All three of these shots really point to, here we have these sort of ordinary scenes that we're witness to all the time. I mean, when we go out, we go to work, we're going out shopping, we're going out vacationing, whatever it is, these are scenes that we see all the time. But how many times do you consider it for your street photography? How many times do you just simply walk past it because you don't think it has any real interesting potential? And what I'm challenging you to do is to think about, well, if you start paying attention to the light and not the scene for whatever it is, if you start looking at the light that's illuminating the scene, all of a sudden it can flip that switch that makes you consider the most ordinary space as something that could be really, really interesting and great for a street photograph. And I think all three of these shots succeed in doing just that. So I hope you found that helpful as usual. If you want to contribute images to the Candid Frame Flickr pool, you can just go to Flickr, do a search on the Candid Frame, and ask to be added, and I'll be glad to do that. I play catch up and usually do it once a week. So if you experience a delay in submitting your request and me approving it, don't worry about it. It just takes me about a week to get to these, but I'll approve everyone who asks to join, and then you can submit your images. And if you've never heard of the Candid Frame and you're interested in more things about photography, go to thecandidframe.com, and there you'll find over 300 interviews with photographers from all over the world, from various genres of photography. The podcasts are usually 45 minutes long, and you can download them via iTunes, or you can use the free Candid Frame app, which is available for Apple iOS, Android, and Windows. And it's also available on iTunes, and as soon as they're released, usually on Sunday nights, you'll find them in the YouTube feed. So thanks again for joining me, and I will see you next time.